until the beginning of this year. Earlier in the year it started. Not one Democrat asked Director Wray. We all remember Director Wray was here. Not once, not twice, multiple times. Nobody asked Director Wray about Epstein before this committee. Nobody was that concerned. Where was the concern for the victims then? Where was the moral righteousness then? Where was the outrage then? Where was the sense of duty then? Where was the desire for accountability then? Where was the urgency for justice then? Most of all, where the hell was the integrity then? You know what the truth is. Let's just say it, man. Tell the truth time. The truth is, it's politically useful for them to try to do this now, even though they didn't give a damn about it in the past. And you know what? That's an insult to the victims, and that's an insult to America. Continue to do the work you're doing. Continue to uncover what needs to be uncovered. One real quick thing before I say anything to 9/11. We know that was mishandled by the past director and by the past FBIs. There are family members here. There are family members who are concerned. God Almighty, we want to get to the truth of that. I ask you, please, to meet with them, to talk to them, and to investigate this with truth. You know, in the Biden administration, we went through a very dark and difficult period of time. The FBI trust was broken with the people. Catholics were, this is the stuff we've been talking about, were labeled radical threats for praying in their churches with their rosaries. Parents at school boards were called terrorists for standing up for their children. Hindu holy men in New Jersey. We have the largest Hindu temple in the world. They were attacked. They were put up against the wall with guns to their heads. So it isn't just a Catholic or Christian thing. American Jews were targeted in colleges and universities, and a lot of folks in the FBI, in the past FBI, not this one, didn't give a damn. We can't go back to targeting religion. We can't go back to silencing free speech. The Biden administration did that. So I got questions for you. Hopefully thoughtful questions that you can answer for us in a thoughtful way. How is this FBI now, under your leadership, how are we restoring trust for Catholics, for Hindus, for Jews, for parents, for all the other, for just American people that were targeted by FISA because they had a different viewpoint? How are we restoring that trust in the FBI?
Multiple ways, sir. One, and maybe most importantly, is through transparency and providing the American public with the material so they can see, read it themselves as to what the abuses were in the past, whether it relates to the Catholic memo or the Hindu incident you talked about at the largest temple in North America. Any institution of faith and any member of faith will not be investigated by this FBI because they are men and women of faith ever, period.
And nor should they. Nor should they. I don't mean to interrupt you, but my God, of all the amendments to the freedom of speech, freedom to believe in what you want to believe in, I know you're standing up for that. Continue. I'm sorry.
No, that's it. Sorry.
Okay. The Richmond memo was driven by a reliance on sources. The Southern Poverty Law Center, you know, the words sound nice, but the organization's not so nice. And we've seen the Anti-Defamation League distort data that counts as violence. Have you been able to identify and eliminate these kinds of partisan sources? We welcome all sources, but we want objectivity and neutrality and decency in the way we report all this. Have you been able to uncover any information there? How do we make sure our sources are good in the future?
We have reviewed the source processes that infiltrate any institutions of faith, and they will no longer be going into institutions of faith. They will be directed towards criminal activity and protecting the homeland, the two most important missions the FBI has, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
Good. And I'll say this, there was a lot of bull today, a lot of you know what, and I'm not going to say it because I respect the institution so much going on around here. Continue to do the work of the people. You are here for that reason. The administration is here for that reason. It was weaponized and politicized, the FBI, in the past. I hope to God we never, ever see that again. One of the darkest parts of American history. Thank you, Mr. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York is recognized for UC.
I would like to introduce a CNN article that explains how an alleged top leader of the MS-13 gang was dismissed. His case was dismissed in Brooklyn so that he could be deported back to El Salvador, even though he was charged with murder.
Without objection.
Mr. Chairman, I have some unanimous
The
consent
lady from
requests.
Washington is recognized.
I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an article titled "Justice Department Told Trump in May That His Name is Among Many in the Epstein Files."
Without objection.
I have another one that is a July 2025 article by the New York Times entitled "How a Frantic Scouring of the Epstein Files Consumed the Justice Department," stating that DOJ and FBI employees reviewing the Epstein files were instructed to flag any mentions of Trump and other celebrities.
Without objection.
And I have another unanimous consent request to enter into the record an August 2025 article by The Guardian entitled "Ghislaine Maxwell Hinted at Epstein's Ties to Trump Officials. Why Wasn't She Pressed for Names?" stating that Maxwell told Deputy U.S. Attorney Todd Blanche that some of the, quote, cast of characters around Epstein are in Trump's cabinet.
Without objection. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Patel, for coming before us to testify today. I am concerned by your repeated claims that you're not able to disclose anything further about the Epstein investigation and files, and that there's no evidence of a broader conspiracy or other people who should be charged, because the American people aren't buying that you've been transparent or that there's nothing further to be seen. In your exchange with my colleague, Mr. Roy, you reiterated something that I heard you say yesterday in your Senate testimony, and that is, under your direction, the FBI will always follow the money. Is that right?
The money, did you say? Yes.
Yes, you said you'll follow the money. That's great. And just now you said you welcome the opportunity to investigate new evidence. So there has been significant recent reporting just in the last couple of weeks that after Jeffrey Epstein was arrested, 4 major banks flagged more than $1.5 billion in suspicious transactions connected to him that suggested a massive conspiracy related to his child sex trafficking activities. Director Patel, has the FBI reviewed the $1.5 billion in suspicious bank transactions flagged to the government relating to Epstein and his co-conspirators?
I know the FBI has reviewed numerous SARs. I don't know the totality of that number.
Okay, can you provide us with that number?
I'll get back to you.
Okay. And have you initiated any new investigation of those bank transactions since, say, September 8th, when the new reporting came out?
I'll check with the Treasury Department because they're the lead on that.
Okay, so Director Patel, how many individuals or entities has the FBI interviewed, subpoenaed, or compelled to testify? Can you give us those numbers with respect to these bank transactions?
Not off the top of my head. I'll have to work with Treasury.
Okay. We're concerned, you see, because you say you're going after child predators, but
We are.
obviously this is how you follow the money, is if you follow the bank transactions that apparently enabled the child sex trafficking. Would you agree?
It's one of the valuable investigative tools is to follow the money.
Okay. Have Jeffrey Epstein's victims have asked us to ask you whether or not you've investigated Epstein's lawyers, the lawyers who facilitated those payments. Have you subpoenaed or questioned any of those lawyers?
So in 2018 and 19, what I recollect is many, if not every one of those lawyers was part of the investigation.
But you weren't there at that time,
I
right?
wasn't there.
Okay. So can you get us the names and the numbers of who was investigated then with respect to those lawyers?
As long as I'm allowed to release it, absolutely.
Okay. Well, if we provide you with subpoenas, I assume you can release it. Is that right?
We have a current subpoena and we're working with Congress to provide it.
Okay. You've said that the Acosta investigation had an original sin. What do you mean by that?
Basically, if you're looking at an actual pedophile ring, what you should not do is limit the time frame in which you're legally able to collect information. So search warrants that Mr. Acosta utilized in 2006 and 7 leading to the 2008 plea agreement had a very specific narrow window of years, I think 3 or 4 years. And so information pursuant to legal process wasn't collected for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. It also, subpoenas were not sent out to hundreds of witnesses at the time, hundreds of victims at the time. None of that was done. None of these people were put in grand juries. And so the totality of information from the jump, instead of being this big, was like this. And that, in my opinion, is not how you run an investigation if you're trying to break a sex trafficking ring.
So you're now in charge of the FBI. Why haven't you done that investigation?
Great question. And here's the answer. Simply because I am not able to go back 20 years and collect information that the courts had decided was already subject to search warrants. They have said this was in the investigation. There's a non-prosecution agreement out of that plea. And when the case was reopened, and this is where it comes into play, when the case was reopened in 2018 and 2019, the search warrants again were limited to the conduct of Jeffrey Epstein. Now, whether that's right or wrong, that's a different discussion, but I'm telling you, that's the
Okay,
information
well,
we
I think that
reviewed.
is a different discussion. And I think the discussion we'd like to have today is why you aren't following the money with respect to the broader conspiracy that it has been reported in the New York Times and elsewhere. And that if you really want to attack the issue, if you wanted to attack the issue, if you wanted to get to the bottom of it, if you wanted to disclose what really was involved in the Epstein files, the Epstein cover-up, that you would be taking very different actions that you are today. I do want to seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the New York Times September 8th, 2025 article, How J.P. Morgan Enabled the Crimes of Jeffrey Epstein.
Without objection.
And also an article dated July 17th, 2025 in the Epstein case, Follow the Money.
Without objection.
Okay, thank you.
Gentlelady yields back.
Mr. Chairman,
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
thank you much. Pursuant to Clause 2K6 of Rule 11, I move that the committee subpoena the CEOs of 4 banks, JP Morgan, that's Jamie Dimon, Bank of New York Mellon, Robin Vince, Bank of America, Brian Moynihan, and Deutsche Bank, Christian Sowing, in order to get the suspicious transaction reports. These 4 banks have flagged to the government $1.5 billion in suspicious transactions related to the sex trafficking crimes and conspiracy of Epstein, Maxwell, and all of their collaborators. And as you know, Mr. Chairman, we got the SARS reports for Hunter Biden totaling around $20 million. And so these $1.5 billion in SARS reports we should get, especially since the director doesn't seem to be forthcoming. And I requested, that we do this immediately.
I think the director's been very forthcoming. We will hold any motion to subpoena in abeyance until the conclusion of the hearing. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Patel, for being here. It is quite clear that certain members of this committee, they want their 15 seconds on TV stamping and coming. Maybe it's for fundraising. Maybe they're struggling in their district. They need a little bump. But they turn a committee into a clown show, and that's what we're seeing. You're being unjustly attacked today. I watched the Senate hearings yesterday. You were attacked there. We know there's an agenda. There's always an agenda. It's the same characters with the same personalities, the same objective, and that is destroy the mega movement. You're being attacked, Director, is because you're effective. You highlighted what you've been doing in DC with the president and reducing violent crime. You're very effective. Another individual that was very effective with meaningful debate and dialogue was Charlie Kirk. And they killed him for it. Charlie Kirk was a man of faith. First and foremost, he loved his Lord Jesus. He loved his family. Beautiful wife, beautiful children. Just a remarkable, honorable man that was silenced with this assassin's bullet. I would say if Charlie Kirk lived in the biblical times, he'd have been the 13th disciple. He'd have been the 13th disciple. We have a new committee, if you're not aware, a new select committee regarding January 6th. I'm honored to be on that committee. I'm looking forward to working with other members to expose truth, questioning federal agencies that were involved on January 6th, like the FBI, played a role, but we don't really know, Director, to what extent. We don't know. The January 6th sham committee was not formed by Nancy Pelosi to seek truth. It was nothing about getting to the truth about January 6th. Their sole mission was to damage Donald J. Trump and end his political career. And everybody knows it. That's what the purpose was. You know what's nice, so I kind of get to ask the question, though. How did that work out for you? Donald J. Trump is back in the White House, and America loves him. I spent 30 years in law enforcement, retired sheriff from a large county in the great state of Texas. I have seen, Director, I have seen more enthusiasm and support for law enforcement today because of what you and Donald Trump have done over the last 8 months to protect the American people. The American people couldn't count on their government to protect them. Crime is rampant. And now we have a president and an administration that puts the American people and their safety first. It's interesting, a few minutes ago, a classmate reached out to me and sent me I told him, I said, yes, we got Director Patel in front of our committee today. And Andy Kane wanted me to tell you, he said, quote, tell him we love him. Tell him we love him and all the brave warriors exposing the deep state. Kash, you're a great American, sir. You're a great American. Your work as the director of the FBI is commendable. It's commendable. And I want to thank you, sir. Thank you for your service. Keep up the good fight, brother. Don't let him tear you down. Keep up that good fight. You have it in you. With that, sir, I yield back.
Gentlemen, yield to me. Director Patel, there were 26, the gentleman mentioned the select committee, there were 26 confidential human sources at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. 4 entered the Capitol and thereby broke
So we've provided 600 pages of documents to this committee alone regarding January 6th. That's 600 pages more than any of my predecessors.
Yep.
Generally speaking, confidential human sources are always paid by the FBI. That's how it works. I can't speak to the specifics on each one and how much they make.
And we appreciate it. We've reviewed some of that material and you've given us a lot of material that we didn't get from Director Ray. That specific question I think is important to the American people. Were people who were confidential human sources of the FBI who broke the law, one was recommended for prosecution, my understanding is, by the information we've received from you. Were they actually paid by the very taxpayers who may have got charged with the same offense? I think that's important for us to understand.
I'll get back to you on that.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Director Patel. I'm going to focus a little bit on domestic terrorism. We have a graph here, data up to 2021, but as you can tell, domestic terrorism is on the rise. Nation, our citizens under threat. We saw the assassination of Charlie Kirk, 2 assassination attempts on the president, school shooting, Minnesota last month, and closer to home, just a couple of days ago, Huntington Beach, peaceful vigil for Charlie Clark, infiltrated by neo-Nazis who essentially made the local individuals attending that event fear for their safety. All of us know that a lot of these domestic attacks are by lone wolves, but yet they do leave clues, social media or elsewhere. Director Patel, you're it. You're the thin blue line. The FBI, your job to protect our citizens back home from those that would harm us. You have to find the needle in the haystack. Takes a lot of work, a lot of resources. Talking to my local sheriff this morning who said they're concerned. Federal cuts to local grants that help them do the job. Then, of course, let's not forget about other threats that are coming before us, like high-tech fraud. Local senior recently was talking to me about a text she had gotten, a demand by the IRS to send a payment immediately, or the IRS agents were on their way to arrest this individual. Pretty gutsy stuff by folks probably from Europe, North Korea, Russia, China, people, okay, going after those precious savings our senior citizens rely on. Yet the president's proposing a budget cut of $500 million or more to your organization, the FBI. You've said that that'll essentially equate to about 1,300 less jobs at the FBI. So I'm going to ask you essentially, what is it that we can do to help you do your job? Little concerned. Friday night lights. One of the events I love to do on Friday nights, go to the local high school football game. Sit there at the stadium and you always say, what if? What if? You're the thin blue line. Can you do your job cutting $500 million from your budget?
Thank you, sir. I think we are doing our job, and the distinction is with the budget that we have, we are flexing more resources to the field. California is receiving the largest FBI plus up of any state in the union due to that plus up. They're not getting a reduction. No state is getting a reduction. Every state is getting a plus up. And so I'm utilizing the money that we have to first plus it up. And the empty vacancies that we have, those haven't been filled in years, not under my leadership.
Here's my concern. You're going to do well. You're doing more with less, is what you're saying. Yet we're about to vote on a budget that has $88 million more to protect members of Congress, the executive branch, and the Supreme Court. There's a contradiction here. Back on Main Street, we're saying you can do more with less, you can protect them with less money. Yet here in Washington, we're saying we need more money to protect members of Congress. It's a little contradiction here. Or maybe, sir, you ought to talk to leadership about coming in with your management style to protect the Supreme Court, Congress, and the administration. Otherwise, it's essentially a hypocritical situation. We need more protection, yet folks on Main Street can do with less.
My concern is folks on Main Street. We also were, I think we received over 300 million in the big, beautiful bill. And we're also receiving pots of money from our interagency. So this sort of 500 million cut isn't entirely accurate.
You're still getting cut 200 million plus. You're still moving your agents to do ICE work. So you are leaving a lot of bases uncovered. And I'm not going to be argumentative with you, Director Patel. I'm just saying, if that thin blue line does not hold, people on Main Street will pay the price.
I agree with you, sir.
And I just look forward to working with you because I am very concerned that these kinds of budget cuts are short-sighted, especially when my local sheriff calls me and says, we need more support, and we're looking at budget cuts.
I'll work with you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield time.
Mr. Chairman, I have another unanimous consent request.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York is recognized for unanimous consent.
I seek to introduce a December 2024 OIG report from the Department of Justice, which confirms the conclusion of the Bill Barr Justice Department that the so-called whistleblower, a disgruntled former employee of the Intelligence Committee, was not a credible witness and there were no further actions taken.
Without objection.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to submit some items for the record.
You bet. Gentleman from California.
First one, Trump's deportation diverts FBI agents off child predator cases. Second one, FBI director backtracks on administration's proposed budget cuts. And number three, Trump administration says 70% of ICE detainees do not have criminal convictions.
Without objection. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you. Director, earlier this year, the committee learned of new documents tied to the Crossfire Hurricane investigation and the Russia collusion hoax against President Trump. Your efforts in declassifying key documents tied to this investigation allowed the committee to acquire thousands of pages that it did not have previously. Did any of your predecessors make any effort to declassify these documents?
Not to the extent we have.
Did any of your predecessors share or leak any details that were classified at the time?
There are ongoing leak investigations across the board at the Bureau related to this.
I believe one of those is Mr. Comey, and I thank you for continuing that investigation. Among the declassified documents are the Durham Report Annex, the Crossfire Binder, and the Nellie Orr Criminal Referral. Could you summarize for those watching what we know about the Russia collusion hoax so far?
Well, sir, I think the record will speak that the Russia collusion matter was perpetrated by a political party to go overseas and obtain information from a foreign intelligence asset, only to have that information, which was demonstrably false, turned over to the FBI, who walked into a federal FISA secret court and asked for a secret surveillance court order and lied to the federal court. And we know that because someone was convicted of it, and only to surveil the political opponent. So that is a massive scandal. We helped expose it. And in terms of the pages of productions, I provided 1,400 pages of production related to Crossfire Hurricane, and my predecessors have provided 0.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate your courage and commitment to declassifying these important documents for our review, and hope that you'll continue with this commitment. Can we expect to see more declassification efforts regarding the Crossfire Hurricane and Russia collusion hoax?
Yes.
Thank you. I yield the remaining balance of my time to Chairman Jordan.
Oh, I thank the gentleman for yielding. And Director, that's when it all started, right? The whole Russia, that's when it all began. And then it was Mueller, then it was impeachment, then it was Jack Smith and Fonnie Willis and Alvin Bragg and you name it. But it all started then. And that's why I think the gentleman from Texas wants to make sure we get all the information there. And I want to go back to when it was changed. We talked about this earlier. I just want to read to you what the CIA officer said to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, quote, Brennan refused to remove the dossier, and when confronted with the dossier's main flaws, he responded, yes, but doesn't it ring true? So that's what he initially said. And then when he was talking to this committee, he said the CIA was very much opposed to having any reference or inclusion of the Steele dossier in the intelligence community assessment. So on one hand, you got a witness who was there who said he refused to remove it even though he knew it was garbage. And then he's on the other hand telling the committee, no, we didn't want anything to do with it. It shouldn't have been a part of the intelligence community assessment, which we know it was. You know it was. You found that. Those are two entirely different stories. I think Mr. Brennan has some explaining to do, frankly, what happened there. And I think you said earlier that this whole thing, and I think you said to Mr. Gooden, this whole thing is being looked at as part of this grand conspiracy to undermine the president, whether it's Comey, Brennan, Clapper, former head of the Intelligence Committee, now senator from, whoever it is, that's all being looked at. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Well, we appreciate that. And part of what's also being looked at, and I think the gentleman from Wisconsin brought this up earlier, what is a burn bag for, by the way?
Generally speaking, the intelligence community obviously utilizes and possesses classified documents, but drafts of those classified documents and even ultimate finished products of those classified documents have to be recorded and or discarded. And if they are discarded, the only way we do that, the hard copies, is we literally put them in burn bags that are identified specifically for that purpose. And there is a very exact courier system in which those burn bags are obtained and the material inside is destroyed.
So it's to get rid of the material, right?
Yes, sir.
And it looks like the annex that Mr. Durham in his investigation had was put into a burn bag by your predecessor, I assume, to be destroyed. Is that accurate?
Without getting into the stylization of the evidence, anything that's put in a burn bag is for purposes of destruction.
Do you find that interesting that the Durham annex was placed in a burn bag, that you would discover that when you took over as the head of the FBI?
We found a lot of information in a lot of burn bags.
Well, we appreciate you finding that. We'd like to know a little bit more about that, and we look forward to that information coming forward. And I appreciate the gentleman yielding. With that, we now recognize the gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding it. Thank you, Director Patel, for being here today. I have a couple of questions regarding a terrible shooting that occurred in Colorado, a state, as you may know, that I represent. You've testified previously about, I think, what you would describe as your efforts to provide more information regarding the investigation with respect to the horrific assassination of Mr. Kirk. And so, in that same vein, I'm hoping you can provide this committee and my constituents in Colorado with some clarity.
Absolutely.
I think, as my colleagues know, in Evergreen, Colorado, Jefferson County, a county that I proudly represent, at Evergreen High School, a shooter ultimately injured 2 students. Were praying for their swift recovery. There's an article here from Colorado Public Radio. The title is, quote, FBI was already investigating an account that may have been linked to the Evergreen shooter. You're familiar with the circumstances generally, Director, regarding this terrible tragedy.
Yes.
So my understanding from the public reporting is that an organization reported to the FBI in July of this year regarding, just reading here from the article, that the FBI opened an assessment into a social media account user whose identity was unknown. and who was discussing the planning of a mass shooting with threats nonspecific in nature. This is the FBI statement to the press. And that the FBI continued to work this assessment investigation to identify the name and location of the user up until September 10th, 2025, which was the day of the tragedy. Can you provide us some clarity on what were the impediments to finding, the account user, and maybe describe in greater detail the FBI's work in that regard?
Generally speaking, yes, because I know even though the shooter's deceased, the investigation we're not done.
Sure.
And so the impediments to finding these individuals, and you highlight a great point. We had 2 huge tragedies in the span of days in this country. The school shooting in Evergreen, Colorado being one of them. And proactively going out onto these social media platforms, which are so large, is our biggest impediment. And we need to rely on the service providers. There's actual legislation, I can't remember the name of it, that's up for renewal, which will, and I think at the end of the month, which gives service providers the ability to report that information in from their end without liability. We need that to continue, because while the FBI has so many people and the police are great at doing it, there's just too many platforms to cover down on.
Well, I appreciate that, Director Patel, and I think we're certainly, I'm interested in continuing this conversation, because I think the reporting suggests that there's a pattern, and that ultimately, we want to make sure that law enforcement is able to prevent this kind of tragedy from happening in the future. I have a question. It's not meant as a gotcha question, so it just frame it there. But it is in regards to some reporting around a periodic transaction report that you had filed earlier, this year. So this is in July, pursuant to the ethical obligations as a senior executive official. You remember filing that in July?
Yes.
Yeah. So in that report, as best as I can surmise, you disclosed that you divested, $100,000 or more in a variety of different stocks, which I presume was pursuant to the ethics agreement that you negotiated with the Department of Justice. In that same report, there's a disclosure regarding purchases of two different transactions. So between $15,000 to $50,000 in a national coffee house chain, and between $50,000 to $100,000 in a semiconductor company on May 9th and May 12th. Are those transactions that you're doing personally, or are these through a stockbroker, or are these transactions that you're handling yourself?
So how they happen is I submit proposals under DOJ guidance to say, hey, I would like to trade this or that. And they run their review, and the FBI runs a review, and then they come back and say yes or no. And then I make the transaction.
Is there a reason that you decided to make the purchases into those 2 companies?
Generally speaking, before I got this job, I was, trading stocks, but not a lot like most people. And I just follow certain industries, and I thought they would be a good investment.
So the reason why I ask, right, because you had divested in other companies.
Yeah.
And I presume that wasn't because there were actual conflicts. It's just that you wanted to avoid an appearance of impropriety.
It was both.
Both.
Yeah.
But not all of the companies were conflicts.
Whatever they make
divested from.
I don't make the call, they make the call.
Sure.
Yeah.
I guess my point would be, the reason why I ask is, why I said it's not a gotcha question. I have for years led an effort here in Congress to try to ban members of Congress, senior executive officials, from trading stocks. And it's bipartisan in nature. We're working really hard to get that done, Republicans and Democrats. And you can understand, I think, given your role, given the nature of the position that you hold as the leader of the largest law enforcement agency in our country, that divesting entirely, not doing day trading now, I think would be something that would be in the interest of the American people. So I just would hope you would consider that, and that moving forward, that perhaps not purchasing stocks in individual companies, I would think would be something that would be worth pursuing.
Gentleman's time is.
I'm happy to give the witness an opportunity to.
No, thank you. I'll work with you on it.
Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Patel, for being here today. Newly declassified documents confirm that the intelligence community under President Barack Obama knowingly relied on unverified and fraudulent evidence to manufacture a false claim that Russia, in fact, meddled in the 2016 election. Is there more to be done to uncover the depths and origins of the Russian collusion hoax?
There is, and we're doing it.
Why should Americans still care about that, Director Patel?
Everybody wants to talk about a weaponized bureaucracy. And when we put out the facts about a weaponized bureaucracy, not because I said so, but because we found the FISA documents, because we found the 302s and the 1023s, then it becomes a political football. My job is to continue to put out that information and let the American public read it for themselves when I'm lawfully able to do so. And that's been my commitment on any subject, Russiagate or otherwise. Wherever the law allows me to do it, I will do it.
You know, when I first came in 2020, the number one concern as I was doing town halls was the weaponization of the government against the American citizen. And so are there things that you're doing, structural reforms that implementing so that the FBI cannot be weaponized again, whether it's against President Trump or future elected presidents?
It shouldn't be weaponized against anyone. And the structural reform is simple. If you're going to go after a political individual or someone seeking political office, there has to be a grounded basis in law and fact to open up a criminal investigation. And if there's not, the investigation isn't even opened. And I've also gone back and reviewed other cases that were opened in prior administrations related to public officials. And we've closed a number of them because we felt that some of these actions were weaponized on either side of the aisle. I felt it wholly inappropriate for the FBI to be playing umpire and referee amongst these decision makers when there was no factual or legal basis to continue those investigations. So I shut them down.
And I think that's so desperately needed because we need to restore trust in law enforcement and certainly in the DOJ and the FBI so that the American people don't fear the very government that is supposed to protect them. And so thank you for doing that. On August 11th, you released to the committee documents concerning leak investigations that began in 2017. You believe these leaks were accidental or were they intentional in order to influence public opinion against President Trump?
When I could publicly make a final decision on that, either through a recommendation of charging that the DOJ makes or findings that I have, I'm able to do so, but they're still not complete.
Why did the FBI under Director Comey want to undermine the Trump administration?
I don't know. You'll have to ask him.
Think it might have been political? How will Director Comey be held accountable for his leaks and classified information concerning the Russian collusion hoax?
Well, anyone. Doesn't matter what you did before or what seat you were in. If you leak classified information, that's illegal. And we will investigate it fully. And if we can bring enough evidence to recommend charges to the Department of Justice, we will. But as you know, in these leak investigations, it's very difficult to produce the information necessary. We know leaks happen. They literally happen every week. It's one of the most destructive things to this country. Media receives classified information beneficial to one side or the other. I'm a fan of none of it, and I want to shut all of it down. And we need to bring some real cases to deter individuals from doing that, and that's my focus.
What was Comey's role in creating the ICA?
You know, speaking from my memory, as the head of the FBI, he was charged under then Director Brennan and Director Clapper and the other IC elements to come in with the NSA, CIA, FBI, and ODNI and put together a collection of information on how the information sort of surrounding Russiagate came together. So he represented the FBI in that.
Former Director of CIA, John Brennan, he's denied that the Steele dossier was used in creating the ICA. Is that true?
Well, it's without commenting on him, the FISA has been released and the dossier was in the FISA. It was in 4 FISAs. So I'll let the public decide.
Well, former Director Brennan actually denied repeatedly that he pushed for the Steele dossier to be included in the ICA. Is that true?
Did not. I'll let his testimony speak for itself, but then Deputy Director Andy McCabe also testified to the House Intelligence Committee, which has now been declassified, that were there no Steele dossier, there would have been no FISA.
Well, my time's getting close, but let me tell you this, sir, and my colleague from Texas said, thank you for the job you're doing. You're making the American people safe. You're restoring trust in these agencies that so many of us had lost trust in. So thank you for the work you're doing. That thin blue line, you're doing a fine job, and we want to let you know we appreciate it. Thank you. God bless you.
Lady from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director, for coming here today. And actually, thank you for your response to my colleague from New York who asked you earlier about violent extremism. And you said that there is violent extreme ideology on both sides. And I think you actually alluded to that same statement yesterday in the Senate. So I too have some questions I'd like to ask you. These are not gotcha questions, and just deny, please, what you deem to be false. So Dylan Roof, who followed white supremacist propaganda murdered 9 Black parishioners in Charleston in 2015. Do you deny this?
I'm sorry. Dylan Ruth,
Roof?
can you give me some more information?
You're head of the FBI, you probably know this. If you don't know, that's fine. You can,
If you
okay.
can give me a reminder, I've got a lot in front of me.
It was national news. Robert Bowers murdered 11 Jewish worshipers in Pittsburgh in 2018.
I do remember that.
And it was the deadliest anti-Semitic attack. So do you admit that that happened?
I'm not saying the other thing didn't happen. I'm just asking for a little information.
Patrick Cruces, who posted a manifesto about a Hispanic invasion, walked into a Walmart in El Paso, Texas in 2019 and began firing. He murdered 23 people that day, and the youngest was 15. Do you admit or deny that that happened?
I'll take your presentation as accurate.
All right, well, I have to say all of these cases have been adjudicated. As I said, they are not gotcha questions. These incidents were national news. And as director of the FBI, you have access to all of this information. So in 2022, Peyton Grendon walked into a supermarket in a Black neighborhood in Buffalo, New York, and started shooting. He murdered 10 people that day. And on September 10th, your friend Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Tyler Robinson has been taken into custody and charged, but also on that day, Desmond Holley, a 16-year-old white male, shot and injured 2 students at a high school in Colorado before killing himself. And according to the Anti-Defamation League, he had a fascination with mass shootings and white supremacy. So do you admit to, deny these facts?
Those happened.
Okay. Your predecessor, former FBI Director Christopher Wray, said that one of the most dangerous concerns is that racially motivated violent extremism, especially white supremacists, has been the biggest chunk of our domestic terrorism cases and is responsible for the most lethal attacks over the last decade. Do you admit or deny, A, that he said this?
I'll let the record reflect that. Whatever he said was what he
All
said.
right, and do you agree?
That there is racially motivated crimes being committed in America, yes.
Yes, especially white supremacists, which is the biggest chunk of our domestic terrorism. I'm glad that you said this. So last week, President Trump was asked if there were extremists on both the left and the right. He was actually asked this by Fox and Friends, and his exact words were, "I'll tell you something that's going to get me in trouble, but I couldn't care less. The radicals on the right oftentimes are radical because they don't want to see crime. The radicals on the left are the problem, and they're vicious, and they're horrible, and they're politically savvy." Do you agree with the president?
I don't speak for the president. The president speaks for himself.
Do you agree with the president?
I don't, on what matter?
On the question that I just asked, do you agree with his statement about the radical left?
That there's ideology that's driving violence on both sides? Yes, that's what he acknowledged.
No, he didn't. He didn't.
Okay.
But I'm glad that you're saying that and actually creating some separation between you and the president. And I'm glad that you
That's literally
are
not what happened. He said
acknowledging
both.
that there is violent extremism on both sides. What's interesting is that the research arm of the Department of Justice, the National Institute of Justice, do you know what that is?
I'm familiar with them.
Okay, great. It is the research arm of the Department of Justice, and it published an article in 2024 devoted to domestic radicalization, violent extremism, and terrorism. I have it. It's interesting that it's no longer on the website. It has been scrubbed, but I ask these questions because what makes a strong, qualified director of any business, of any household, of the FBI, what makes a reputable prosecutor is not lapdog loyalty, but a commitment to the creed that evidence is agnostic and that the evidence will lead you to making the right decisions. In your job, no one's job is to like the data or the evidence. It is to collect it. That is how you gain trust. And Mr. Chair, I would like to enter into the record, if I may. White supremacist group stands by racist ideology with unanimous consent.
Without objection.
Dylan Roof, the radicalization of the alt-right and ritualized racial violence.
Without objection.
Thank you. Another article, how Robert Bowers went from conservative to white nationalist. I'd like to enter that into the record with me.
Without objection.
Patrick Cruces believed he was fulfilling Trump's wishes in El Paso attack, his attorneys said. Like to enter into the record?
Without objection.
Buffalo shooting, how far-right killers are radicalized online. I'd like to enter that into the record.
Without objection.
Evergreen High School shooters online activity reveals fascination with mass shootings, white supremacy. I'd like to enter that into the record.
Without objection.
Murder and extremism in the United States in 2024, a report by the Anti-Defamation League. I'd like to enter that into the
Without
record.
objection.
And the article, the report that was scrubbed from the DOJ just recently, National Institute of Justice Journal focusing on domestic radicalization, violent extremism, and terrorism. I'd like to enter that into the record.
Without objection.
And lastly, the libertarian think tank Cato and their analysis on violent extremism and the right rising in extremist acts. I'd like to enter that into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady from Wyoming is recognized.
Just very quickly, Director Patel, thank you for being here, for your service to this country, and for the transparency that you have brought to the FBI and for the American people. Transparency that was absolutely non-existent in the Biden administration and FBI. I believe that you might have been asked earlier about whether you had had an opportunity to visit with any of Epstein's legal counsel. Were you asked that question earlier?
I think so.
Okay. One of the legal counsels or legal fixers for Mr. Epstein was Stacey Plaskett, the Democrat delegate to Congress from the Virgin Islands. So perhaps for those on the other side who are interested in talking to Jeffrey Epstein's attorneys, they could sure visit with one of their own colleagues. I want to focus on something that I think is very important that has not been addressed enough today, and that is related to the consequences of the Biden open border. One consequence of the Biden border crisis is the impact that it continues to have on our tribal communities, with the cartels taking advantage of our open borders, the Mexican drug cartels, by infiltrating our reservations and bringing violence, drugs, murder, trafficking, and more. Last year, when I questioned the Attorney General Garland about what the DOJ was doing to protect these communities, he simply deflected responsibility and said that Congress had not appropriated sufficient resources for them to be able to protect our tribal communities. Mr. Patel, what is the Trump FBI doing to counter the drug cartel infiltration and other violent crime targeting our Native American communities?
Thank you. It only took more than half of this proceeding to talk about one of the priorities that the FBI has, which is crimes on tribal lands. Every single crime that we have been talking about, whether it's child predators, human trafficking, narco traffickers, murder, they all happen on tribal lands as well. And I've said since the beginning, it is a priority, which is why we launched Operation Not Forgotten on tribal lands. And I'm the first FBI director to meet with the staff and tribal leaders here in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere, and invited them into my office and headquarters to see them, because I need engagement with tribal leadership, and I need our police and FBI agents to be engaging with tribal leadership. Otherwise, we're not going to break through. We have 1,900 Indian country cases open right now. We've got 600 indictments this year alone. We cannot forget tribal lands. Every single one of those people lives in the United States of America, and it is an absolute priority to protect them and their children just as it is anyone else.
So I think it's fair to say that what Mary Garland testified to, that the FBI and DOJ did not have the resources to address that. I think that that was an absolutely false statement. Would you agree with me?
It's a decision by him not to do so. That's not my decision.
At the end of August, the U.S. Attorney and FBI announced that nearly 100 personnel representing members of the Safe Trails Task Force operated near Wyoming's Wind River Reservation to assist with reducing drug trafficking and illegal guns. Director Patel, you have routinely stated that it is your mission to partner with and strengthen local and state law enforcement partners. How does the task force and other FBI efforts bring tribal law enforcement into this process?
The major problem with tribal lands is the sheer tyranny of geography and the amount of coverage that they have on land versus the personnel they have to do it. So what we've done is constantly surge resources to tribal lands across this country on a 30, 60, 90-day rotating basis, reporting back to us saying who needs more. And what we found is that most of these lands can be assisted by our counter UAS program, our drone capabilities, and we're going to do it because what's happening is the Mexican drug cartels are literally flying overhead, dropping their cargo, their narcotics onto this land where no one's looking, and then it's being disseminated to children, to youth, to adults on that land and killing them. And we got to stop it before it gets dropped off.
Well, and your testimony proves that the Biden administration did not lack the resources to address drug and violent crime in tribal communities or around the United States. It instead expended and wasted these resources investigating parents, Catholics. We now find out Turning Point USA, the RNC, and Republican organizations, rather than protecting our Native Americans by closing the border. Is that fair?
I think so.
Wonderful, thank you. And I do appreciate the work that you've done in this regard. I was previously the chairman of the subcommittee on Indian and Insular Affairs with the Natural Resources Committee, and safety and security on our reservations and for our tribal members has been one of our priorities, one of my priorities, and I very much appreciate the work that the FBI has done. Let me know if there's anything else I can do to help you. And with that, I yield back.
I will, ma'am.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentlelady from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for coming in today, Mr. Patel. In the past few months, the country has experienced a string of horrific, high-profile attacks that have been motivated by racial hatred or political ideology. Shooter attacked the CDC headquarters, firing hundreds of rounds and killing a police officer. An arsonist set fire to the Pennsylvania governor, Josh Shapiro's residence, with the governor and his family actually inside. Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband were assassinated earlier this year. Clark and Charlie Kirk was murdered last week. Bomb threats have been made against HBCUs and the DNC, and just the list goes on and on. I only have just a few minutes today, so I don't want to take a lot of time to go into all the countless and devastating violent crimes and incidents that have happened at our schools or on our streets and in our communities that have just been happening all year long. Mr. Patel, just yes or no, is this type of political violence ever acceptable in your eyes?
No.
I'm glad that we agree that these heinous acts designed to instill fear and division in our nation are never, ever acceptable. Yet each of these incidents has recently taken place under your watch. The FBI's website states that protecting the United States from terrorist acts is the FBI's #1 priority, including from domestic terrorists. Is this still your #1 priority?
Domestic terrorism?
Preventing domestic terrorism.
Our #1 priorities are protecting the homeland and international terrorism and crushing violent crime, and domestic terrorism sort of interlays between both of those.
Okay, so well, then I'm glad that you're giving us the right answer, but unfortunately, your actions kind of tell a different story. Earlier this year, you granted the ranks of the FBI's Domestic Terrorism Operations Section. This is the section of the FBI that is most directly responsible for addressing political violence in our country by preventing attacks from occurring and effectively responding to them if they do. The agents in this section are the ones who stopped an individual stockpiling weapons, who planned to attack schools and churches in Florida and seize bombs made by an ISIS sympathizer in New Orleans. And instead of ensuring that this section has all the resources that it needs at a time when its mission is critical, you fired its decorated veteran FBI agents who have served their country proudly under Republican and both Democratic presidents, and you scrapped the tools that they developed to fight domestic terrorism, including the National Domestic Terrorism Incident Database.
I mean, most of that is just not true. We have 1,700 current DT managed programs. We're up 300% in the amount of cases we brought against nihilistic, violent extremists, including 764, wishing to harm our children. The FBI and the men and women are getting after that problem set more than ever because I've unleashed them to do so. And any situation that these tragic occurrences across the country are somehow singularly my fault or disgusting because that watershed goes
Mr.
down to the
Patel,
men
I'm
and
going to
women at the
reclaim my time.
FBI,
Mr.
and
Patel, I'm
they
going
are
to
not
reclaim my time.
responsible
Mr.
for it.
Chairman,
I'm
I'd like
happy to work with you
Mr.
to get them what they
Gentlelady
need.
Consent
gentlelady
request.
controls the time. Unanimous consent request. You'll state
Thank
a
you
request.
very much. Into the record, an article from Reuters tout FBI scales back staffing, tracking of domestic terrorism, probes, sources say. Thank you very much.
Without
I
objection.
appreciate that. So, Mr. Patel, and it isn't just the domestic terrorism operations section. Under your watch, agents are fully diverting their attention to these anti-immigrant and city takeover operations, leaving our children vulnerable to dangerous networks of online predators, both domestic and international. You pulled more than 120 FBI agents from their normal duties to operate sobriety checks and conduct traffic stops, exposing the FBI's fleet of unmarked cars and thereby making it harder for the FBI to combat violent criminal gangs, foreign intelligence services, and drug traffickers in the process.
That's simply not true. If we were not able to do two things at one time, how would we be
Patel, I
seizing
reclaim
record
my
amounts of
time. I reclaim my
fentanyl?
time.
23,000
Chairman, I'd like to
violent
enter
felons have been
into the
arrested.
Time belongs to the
More
More
gentlelady.
than twice as many
Consent
as
Time
last
request.
belongs
year.
to the gentlelady from Georgia.
Thank you very much. And this request basically is, it is an article from Reuters, which quotes law enforcement officers familiar with agents who once covered child exploitation cases, but now focus on immigration child exclusive. Thousands of agents diverted to Trump immigration track down. Mr. Patel, in the short time I have left, your tenure as director of FBI has been somewhat problematic. Americans are left definitely less safe under your watch. You have gutted the FBI's ability to keep safe from domestic terrorism. You have sent FBI agents to conduct traffic stops and round up hardworking immigrants who pose no danger to public safety. People even President Trump referred to as good longtime workers. Your job is to protect and serve the American public.
Time of the
You have
gentlelady.
spent your time protecting heinous individuals and using the FBI to serve as a political circus. You at times have appeared unequipped.
Time of
This
the
country
gentlelady has
deserves better, and I
expired.
yield.
Gentlelady yields
May I
back.
respond?
Sure can.
Simply put, what is it? Are we failing? If we're failing, how are we arresting 23,000 violent felons? Twice as many as this time last year. Are we failing? Because if we're failing, how are we seizing 1,500 kilograms of meth, 25% increase from last year? Are we failing? Because we captured 4 top 10 FBI most wanted from around the world in 7 months. That's more than the entirety of the last administration. Are we failing? Because we put 1,500 child predators in prison. Are we failing? Because we dismantled 300 human trafficking networks. Which is it? You don't like me, that's fine. But don't you dare disparage the men and women of the FBI that are producing record results in historic fashion to protect this country. They are kicking ass for America, and they're going to continue to do so.
We appreciate your leadership. The gentlelady from Florida is recognized.
When I was home recently, I met with the agents leading the Tampa office of the FBI, and I saw what they're focused on in my community: stopping drug traffickers, rescuing children from exploitation, fighting cybercrime, protecting us from acts of terrorism, foreign and domestic. And I know from my time as a federal prosecutor and a judge that this work by the Bureau doesn't make headlines, but it is happening every single day. At the top, accountability is necessary, transparency is critical, but today we've seen an effort not just to diminish, but to distort the work of Director Patel and the agents he leads. If we really care about transparency and about truth, then what we owe to the American people is this reality: that thousands of dedicated professionals at the FBI wake up every single day thinking not about themselves, but about this country, and keeping every single one of us and our children safe from harm. And Director Patel, I would like to hear from you the facts about what the FBI is doing and your efforts to fight crime. Director Patel, isn't it correct that since January 20th, 2025, the FBI has made over 25,000 immigration-related arrests, including 350 members of Tren de Aragua and 195 members of MS-13?
Those numbers are accurate. The Tren de Aragua numbers are up over 350% from the year before.
And during that same period, hasn't the FBI seized over 66,000 kilos of cocaine, 6,000 kilos of meth, and 1,500 kilos of fentanyl?
Not to be nitpicky, but it's 89,000 kilos of cocaine and 7,300 kilograms of meth.
And isn't it also true that the FBI Tampa Division's Panama Express Strike Force specifically seized nearly 67,000 kilos of cocaine valued at more than $1.6 billion from illicit maritime vessels?
One of our best operations out of the Port of Tampa, and I was down there in South Florida when Panex did their work.
Director Patel, since October 7th, 2023 Hamas attack, the FBI has been a co-leader of the Joint Task Force October 7th. Isn't it correct that this task force is actively working to bring justice for victims and to prevent terrorist infiltration at our borders?
Yes, ma'am.
Since January 20th, hasn't the FBI arrested 59 foreign intelligence operatives for spying or smuggling dangerous material into the United States?
Yes, we have, and that's on track to be more than 25% than ever before.
And the FBI has also been leading operations against major cyber threat actors, including those from Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. Isn't that right?
A 17% increase from year to date last year.
Director Patel, the FBI's child exploitation task forces continue to investigate predators who target children online and across our communities. How significant is that threat today, and what results have you seen under your tenure in bringing these offenders to justice?
We have, under Operation Grayskull, dismantled dark web units that are operating online, not just in the United States, but across the world to do our children harm. We have taken into custody more suspects than ever before on those who seek to harm our children. That is what the men and women of the FBI do, and that's what they're going to continue to do. Those are the real results when you let good cops be cops, and when you let us get on these platforms and expose them to the public and show them the harms of these predators on these online gaming systems and social media systems. And we need more help from Congress to allow us more authorities to do that work.
The FBI laboratory manages the Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS, which compares over 25 million DNA profiles and aids more than 125 investigations each day. Director Patel, why is this important to law enforcement nationwide?
All of law enforcement relies on our CJIS operation out of West Virginia. And what that does is allow 19,000 agencies to come in and say, hey, does this guy have a criminal history? Hey, is this an illegal firearm? Do we have a DNA hit like we did in these recent assassinations? That's what the FBI brings to bear, because local and state law enforcement agencies just don't have that capability. And we're doing it 24/7, 365. CJIS does not close for 1 minute.
In your testimony, you noted that the FBI has ongoing counterintelligence investigations into China, Iran, and Russia across all 55 field offices. Why is it essential to maintain that scope of coverage, and what success can you point to in disrupting nation-state actors?
Our biggest threats involving nation-state actors are the PRC, Russia, and China, and they are up 33%, 83%, and 60% respectively in arrest alone this year. Those nation-state actors wish to do harm in our infrastructure, our critical infrastructure system, our energy, our water supply, and also go after and target individuals and senior citizens and take their money through online pig butchering schemes, which we've exposed in Cambodia by way of the CCP. This is groundbreaking work that the American public should be seeing that their FBI is doing, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to report on it.
Thank you, Director Patel. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentlelady from
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple.
unanimous consent.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. In response to Mr. Mattel's making the remarks that that maybe our colleagues are disparaging the men and women of the FBI, I'd like to enter the record 3 unanimous consent requests. One is entitled FBI using polygraphs to test officials' loyalty. The second is Kash Patel knowingly broke law when firing top officials, lawsuit alleges, published by NBC. And the third is FBI forces out more leaders, including ex-director who fought Trump, demand for January 6 agents' names.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Gentlelady from Vermont's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Patel, thank you for being with us today. Appreciate your time. Let me say at the top, political violence should have no place in this country. And I strongly, unequivocally condemn the killing of Charlie Kirk last week. And this is exactly the kind of case that warrants a swift and thorough investigation by the FBI. What shouldn't be happening, however, is this administration's seeming attempt to exploit Mr. Kirk's death within minutes of this horrible, horrible assassination, dividing us even further without knowing enough about the killer's complicated, confused political ideology and the extent of his motivation. And this week, Vice President Vance claimed that this is, quote, an extremely destructive movement of left-wing extremism, and said that, quote, it's part of the reason why Charlie was killed. He pledged to go after organizations on the left. But Director Patel, it was just 3 months ago that Melissa Hortman, the Minnesota House Speaker and her husband, Mark, were shot to death in their home in the middle of the night by a self-identified right-wing extremist and Trump supporter. When that assassination happened, the FBI released a written statement denouncing the killings and pledging to hold the killer accountable. And I thank the Bureau for that. It was clear, concise, to the point. But when you compare that statement to the over 50 mentions of the Charlie Kirk killing and just 4 for the Hortmans on accounts affiliated with the FBI and your personal account, it appears to many Americans that you're valuing some lives more than others, and that's painful. And this is what I'm hearing from my constituents, so I just want to convey that to you. And the vice president didn't even call on right-wing organizations to tone down their rhetoric after that horrific killing in Minnesota, and he never once spoke about dismantling conservative institutions. This week, when the president was asked by a reporter about Speaker Hortman, he claimed he didn't even know who she was. One of the most high-profile assassinations of an elected official in recent memory, and the president claims to know nothing about it, hasn't even heard of it. It was absolutely devastating for her colleagues and for her family. And I think we all can agree in this room that we have to stop this political violence. So my first question to you is, Director Patel, what is your plan as director of the FBI to turn down the temperature, especially in light of the fact that it seems like members of the administration are reacting to political violence based on party affiliation? What's your plan?
I can only speak for myself and the
Of course.
FBI. And what we are doing is, I think I mentioned earlier, we're following the money, because whatever attack you are describing, and they are all despicable, equally so, people need money to operate. People need money to conduct these attacks, to conduct these investigations. And so what we are doing is finding the people that supported this infrastructure system, because even when you say there's a lone, quote unquote, lone wolf actor, he's not truly a lone wolf actor. Something happened along the way.
I agree. And so can I just because we have such little time, are you making a commitment right now to follow where the evidence goes in investigating whether it's violence on the left or the right? Because over the last 10 years, when you look at the ideology, I want to follow up on what my colleague from California said. When you look at the data, you look at the Anti-Defamation League data, 96% of ideological motivated killings were committed by the right wing. When you look at the Institute of Justice report that she cited, it's 5 times the number that 5 times the number of far left extremist incidents are perpetrated by far right. And it's been reported, and she mentioned this, that as of September 12th, 2025, just 2 days after Charlie Kirk's killing, that the DOJ removed that report from the DOJ website. That's why Americans are concerned that there seems to be a separate system of justice, that if you are a Republican and you are attacked, you will get the full weight and authority of the FBI in this administration. But if you are somebody serving in the Minnesota state legislature and you are assassinated in your home, that the response is different. And I think to ignore the threats from the right or try to do a both and when there are multiple instances when it's overwhelmingly coming from the right, this is a disservice, because Americans want to know that whoever they are, whatever their political affiliation, that the response is going to be the same, and it is going to be done with the same diligence. And I'm wondering if you will commit to me right now that you will be a voice right now standing up to those voices in the administration that are adding to the violent rhetoric right now. That's what I'm asking you. Will you commit to this?
Time the gentlelady's expired. The gentleman can respond.
My voice will be through the investigations that the FBI conducts, and we will conduct them all lawfully and equally.
Can we expect in the future that your tweets in related to one killing will be the same level of concern?
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, sir. Director Patel, thank you for being here today. And most importantly, thank you for restoring trust and faith in the FBI, which has been severely eroded under the Biden administration. Thank you for your service and your continued service in this capacity. On April 7th, 2025, Charlie posted on X, "Assassination culture is spreading from the left. 48% of liberals say it would be at least somewhat justified to murder Elon Musk. 55% say the same about Donald Trump. In California, activists are naming ballot measures after Luigi Mangione. The left is being whipped into a violent frenzy and set back. Whether losing an election or losing a court case justifies a maximally violent response, end quote. And unfortunately for Charlie, that reaction also came when they couldn't win a debate on a college campus. You cannot be intellectually honest and say that this problem is on both sides. It's not just what happened to President Trump, it's also what just happened to Charlie. We've gotten to a point in America where violence is encouraged. We have a former president of the United States that opens up his campaign in 2019, that's Joe Biden, by saying that his opponent is a, quote, existential threat to this country. Houston, we have a problem. People that you disagree with are not existential threats. They are not Nazis. They are not fascist. They are not racist. They are not deplorable. They are not irredeemable. They are your fellow Americans who have a different perspective on how government should run and what government should look like. Whether or not we should have strong sovereign borders, whether or not we should have safe communities, whether or not we should have places to worship our God and not worry about being shot, whether or not we live in communities and cities that are not overwhelmed by drugs and crime, whether or not we have two genders, and whether or not we have common sense in our policies and our values. And people that believe these things are not existential threats. I happen to be one of these people that believes all of the above. And as someone that served this country in combat, I can assure you I am not an existential threat to this country because I swore to protect her. I also want to point out, how many cities have you seen burned to the ground since Charlie Kirk's death? 0. No summer of love, no riots, no nothing, no looting, no killing, none. We simply gathered and prayed for his soul, his family, and this country, because that's exactly what we represent. And while we might be angry, this righteous anger will carry on Charlie's message and legacy. I want everybody to know something very simple. Charlie is not dead because of what he said. He is dead because people listened. My time is limited, so I have a few questions for you, sir. And again, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate your time and your service. In your experience in the FBI, have you noticed a precipitous rise in political violence and other associated crimes that you have been investigating so far this year? And if so, is this trend in motive left-wing or right-wing violence?
I can always speak generally, sir. There is too much political violence, and it has been a precipitous rise on too many fronts.
How do we solve this?
We solve this by giving the FBI more authorities to go into and work with the private sector. There are too many online platforms. There are too many social media platforms. There are too many gaming platforms. There are too many places for people from America and around the world to get together without their parents knowing anything about it, without their school teachers knowing anything about it, and infesting the minds of our children and infecting them with radical ideology. And with that is the root cause of these problems. And we must tackle it. It is not a 1950s America anymore. In 2025, the cyberspace needs to be tackled.
Thank you. Switching gears, when your predecessor sat right there in that seat a couple of years, last year in a committee hearing, I asked him a very detailed question about Matthew Thomas Crooks, the shooter responsible for the assassination attempt on President Trump's life. I did get an answer from Chris Wray that day, and I submitted written questions to the FBI and into the record of this committee. And I want to resubmit those questions today because I think we are still awaiting answers to those questions. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit them for the record, please. I'd like to ask you, sir, and the FBI, under your leadership, would you please respond to these questions, and can you commit to doing that?
As soon as the trial's over.
Thank you very much. I will end with this. Charlie Kirk is not dead because of what he said. Charlie Kirk is dead because people listened. He set up a tent that said, "Prove me wrong," and exercised his First Amendment right. That's all he did. And we will continue to do so in this country in order to preserve this constitutional republic. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before I begin, I want to caution my colleagues on, one-sided violence in this country. We just heard that there were no riots on the right. We're literally sitting in the building where there was a giant riot by supporters of the president, the right. We also heard that only leftists, have said that Trump is a Nazi. In 2016, the current vice president of the United States said, Trump is either a cynical asshole or he's America's Hitler. And so this is the problem. Like, I don't want to have to say this garbage, but you want me to sit here and get painted with one brush, the whole left. No, there are extremes on the left, and there are extremes on the right. And we collectively should tackle that. But to come here and just look at us and say we all support what's going on in the extremes is why we can't solve anything in this building. Director, let me say first, thank you for being here, and my condolences on the loss of your friend. And I'm happy to hear that you want to do more on the social media platforms. Okay, it's crazy what's going on the social media platforms. There are so many conspiracy theories on what's going on with Charlie Kirk. Israel assassinated him, right? There are conspiracy theories about your personal social life all day. It is totally rampant. Big names on the right, Candace Owens, right? Talking about how what's been released as far as the dialogue between the perpetrator and his roommate is manufactured by the FBI, manufactured by the administration. It is totally rampant, allowing foreign governments to just perpetrate these platforms, all of these bots, all of the time to weaponize Americans. You see what's going on here? This is a byproduct of all of that. What's going on in the streets is a byproduct of all of that. What's happening is you see people celebrate Luigi Mangione is a byproduct of all of that. And so if we want to do something, then we should talk about Section 230. We should talk about how we're going to make sure that we don't let foreign governments poison our children's mind. And so I will work with you on that, Director.
I'll work with you on 230 any day.
No problem. So now, that was the good part. I want to take your attention back a second, okay? Breaking news. Kash Patel is nominated to be the FBI director. Dan Bongino is nominated to be the number 2 at the FBI. MAGA celebrates, rejoices, bells are ringing out. The team, Patel, Bongino, that sought out every podcast microphone to talk about the Epstein list. The names are finally going to get released. It begins. They produce white binders. Phase 1 with the podcasters. This is not actually one of them, of course. I made this up. Your name's on it, right? And the names are going to come out. Pam Bondi says the list is on her desk. Then a memo comes out all of a sudden and says, there's no list. Oh, no phase 2. Phase 2 binders never happened. You said the conspiracy theories around Epstein just aren't true. They never have been. And yesterday, in an answer to Senator Kennedy, you said the FBI is not in possession of any credible evidence that Epstein trafficked girls to anyone but himself. So according to your testimony yesterday and in this committee, according to the evidence the FBI has, the number of names on the list are 0.
No,
Zero.
The index has been released, and the number of people involved in that trafficking operation were charged in 2018.
Other than Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, your testimony in the Senate and here is that according to the evidence you have, the number of other names is 0.
That were charged based on credible evidence.
Well, who are the other names? Give me the other names that weren't charged.
We are not releasing the names of anyone because the Department of Justice never does that of anyone that didn't have any credible information to attack them.
Let me move forward. The president you've seen the picture of the woman's body with the writing and the president's signature. The president says that's not his.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? President says it's not his. The Republican colleagues say it's not his. The administration say it's not his. Will you be opening up an investigation into the Epstein estate for putting out a fake document with the president's signature linking him to the world's largest pedophile ring? Will you be opening that investigation into that?
On what basis?
On what basis? They literally put out a fake document according to the president with a fake signature. It's a forgery.
of the President of the United States signature. That's the basis.
Sure, I'll do it.
Okay, I look forward to that investigation. Am I over? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your diligence.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California.
Director Patel, as you know, my state, California, is home to the worst public infrastructure failure in U.S. history, known as California High-Speed Rail, although the name is probably a misnomer. Earlier this year, I joined your counterpart at the Department of Transportation, Sean Duffy, doing a compliance review of the federal money the state has received, and the outcome was that the state has not complied with the terms of its billions of dollars in funding because it hasn't actually built anything. And so that federal funding has now been cut off, but a lot of us in California still have questions as to where all the money went. We're 17 years in to this project, and absolutely nothing has been built. Not a single bit of track has been laid. There are no stations, there are no passengers, and the plan initially was to have the whole thing, LA to San Francisco, done by 2020 at a cost of $33 billion. Yet here we are in 2025, nothing has been built. And according to the New York Times, the project won't even be completed this century. And the total cost is now estimated to be over $130 billion. So I just wanted to ask you, do you think this is something that bears scrutiny, or can you confirm whether there's any kind of investigation going on at the FBI?
The FBI certainly can't investigate incompetence, but the FBI certainly can investigate and does investigate waste, fraud, and abuse. And so if we have any information that indicates that that happened in this situation or anything else, we'll look at it.
Thank you very much. We've also, been talking some today about the issues that occurred at the border during the Biden administration. You might not agree with your predecessor on everything, but you probably would agree with some of the statements he made in testimony before this and other committees, raising alarms about the risk of terrorism from illegal border crossings. Since becoming director, have you gotten some insight into how well calibrated those warnings were, and what is the status of that risk now?
Since becoming director, there's been a sharp decrease of border crossings for known or suspected terrorists from the southern border. But unfortunately, there has been a sharp increase of known or suspected terrorists entering through our northern border. And so what I'm trying to do is work with our northern border states and our interagency to tackle that problem. But it is an absolutely massive border that can't physically be sealed. So we're going to have to get creative and put more resources into that.
And in a similar vein, there were over 500,000 unaccompanied children that crossed the southern border during the Biden administration. As we know, many were trafficked either through forced labor or sex trafficking. Do you have any insight as to what the scale of that problem was and how have things changed over the last several months?
Other than what you outlined in terms of how it was described, I don't have any additional details. In terms of how many people are being trafficked into this country, especially unaccompanied missing children, that number has drastically reduced because the coyotes that smuggle these children for their criminal activity are the same ones that smuggle in narcotics, or the same one that traffic older age women. They're all interconnected. And because of the sealing of the southern border by this administration, that has come to a near halt.
That is a very important point, that we have seen far fewer victims of human trafficking because we finally prioritized border security. And by the way, you have children who are getting rescued because of the immigration enforcement activities that unfortunately some politicians in my state are trying to stop, thereby stopping those kids from getting rescued. We've seen, of course, a substantial reduction in crime here in Washington, D.C. since the FBI and the National Guard got involved. I'm kind of asking you to state the obvious here, but what is the mechanism there? Why have we seen a reduction of crime when DC has had such a huge crime problem for years, and then almost overnight we see such a big difference?
Because of the dedication and resources from President Trump's administration to utilize all federal, state, and local assets in a heavily crime-ridden area. I mean, if we did not have a crime-ridden area, then homicides, carjackings, and gun violence would not be dropping by 40, 50, 60%. And when you allow the police, the MPD, to work with federal authorities and allow the National Guard to set up your perimeter, this is what you can do in a few short weeks. And we at the FBI, under Operation Summer Heat, have set those Phase 01 operations in motion 4 months ago, quietly at the direction of President Trump. So we are scattered across cities across this country doing just that. But we're going to need more help to complete the job.
Yeah, in too many places in this country, crime has just been treated as sort of a norm, that this is the way things have to be. What's happened in DC shows that is not the case if we have the right policies and the right priorities. Finally, this is tragically the second time in as many years that we've had an FBI director here following either an assassination or an assassination attempt. And so since there's been some time now since from the attempted assassination on President Trump at Butler, would you say that the public's understanding of what took place on that day is fairly consistent with all of the facts as you know them, or do you believe there's still material facts that have not been made public or are not fully understood by the public?
No, I think it's fairly consistent.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. The lady from Texas is recognized.
Man, oh man, there has been so much today, and I truly don't know where to start. So I'm just going to make sure that we start off with a few facts. So a couple of facts that we need to make clear for everyone is that, number one, Director Christopher Wray, when he was appointed to be the head of the FBI, was appointed by Donald Trump. Now, I will agree that I definitely take issue with a number of decisions that Donald Trump makes, especially when it comes to the people that he decides to appoint to very important positions, including this one, because I did have to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. But when I say that you are the least qualified FBI director in the history of the FBI, that is real, because you are the only one that never even served with the FBI prior to joining. Yet we are supposed to believe that
That's
you are
false.
the greatest thing since sliced bread. I didn't ask you a question. Now, what I want
Still
to go
false.
through is to talk about why you are a failure and why, honestly, we just need to tell you bye-bye. I know that you got a little upset and you put on your show for your boss because it seems like you're trying to save your job when it came to talking to Senator Booker yesterday. But let's go through some of your failures. So before you were even confirmed, and I think one of my colleague from Georgia, pointed out that you are already targeting career officials so that you could direct illegal firings. Mind you, these cases that you were so upset about, which are the ones tied to Trump, the cases came through his handpicked FBI director. And frankly, when people sit around and say things like, oh, we're happy because now we feel safe. I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists, because I specifically as a Black woman definitely don't feel safe. And frankly, my colleagues have been real nice to you today, and I applaud them, but I don't have the same demeanor because I know that multiple colleagues on this side of the aisle have faced death threats. In fact, somebody tried to kill one of my colleagues. And frankly, I don't know if this FBI or under your leadership, if those people would have been caught. I don't have any confidence in you. And if we start talking about the reasons that I lack confidence, we could start with you not just wanting to acknowledge some simple facts. Simple facts like the vast majority of the threats are coming from right-wing extremism. And I know my colleagues have tried to stress this, but I decided that I would maybe do it in a different way. Number one, I have a couple of UCs. Kim Buck, one of multiple Republicans receiving death threats for voting against Jim Jordan as House Speaker.
Without objection.
Another one, Republican lawmaker says she received death threats after voting against Jim Jordan in Speaker's race.
Without objection.
In addition, there was another one from another colleague who now is leaving Congress because they said that they were calling his wife anonymously and threatening her life to the extent that she ended up sleeping with a firearm.
Without objection.
Okay, so here's the deal. How are we supposed to have confidence when you're sitting up here telling the Senate yesterday that it will take you 14 years before you can get the FBI fully staffed to do their jobs? You're also now redirecting resources so that they can go and play ICE agents on the streets. You're getting rid of your most qualified people. And even when it came down to somebody that you consider to be a friend, you were posted up having some fancy dinner to the extent that you posted not only once erroneously, you posted twice erroneously as it relates to catching somebody. And then you want to go and say, let me take a victory lap. Because honestly, if it wasn't for parents deciding that they were going to turn in their child, it seems like y'all wouldn't have got there. even though he literally confessed online. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing, except for trying to put on a show for the apprentice or whatever you want to call him. The day after all of this took place, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCUs. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, Black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers are so very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem, the one that is leading to children being killed, children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're worshiping in their churches.
The time of the gentlelady has expired. If the gentleman would like to respond to any of that. Well, I mean, I'll respond. Kash Patel, as I said when I introduced him, public defender, former prosecutor, top staffer on the House Intelligence Committee, Deputy Director of National Intelligence with the National Security Council, Chief of Staff at the Department of Defense, and FBI Director. I think that's pretty good resume for the guy who's now running the top law enforcement agency in our country. And we've seen all the stats that he's given to the committee on how much better they're doing at getting the bad guys than the previous guy was doing. With that, I recognize the gentleman from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I think you're witnessing some auditions, clickbait auditions for the Academy Award for my Democratic colleagues. We'll see how they fare as they're on MSNBC later on today. Do you care, before I launch into my line of questioning, to respond to Ms. Crockett from Texas on that very elaborate and theatric display?
Here's what I've learned in my government service. I don't give a damn what they say about me as long as I'm succeeding in the mission. We're succeeding in the mission because the men and women of the FBI have never been empowered to do more work and to hit the streets harder than by President Trump's authorities and resources he's given us. And so all I care about is that we are capturing more child predators than ever before, taking more drugs off the streets than ever before, that we are capturing murderers at a significantly historic rate, and we're delivering this country the lowest murder rate in recorded history. That are facts that you cannot dispute. But you can come at me all you want. I don't care.
Thank you, Director, for that. And we appreciate your service. We appreciate the results speak for themselves, I think, pretty plainly, and your commitment not only to results, but to transparency. So we do appreciate that. Director, who was John Durham?
He was a former federal prosecutor, United States attorney, and ultimately appointed special counsel in the first Trump administration.
Correct. And what there was a document that he released in his findings called the Durham Report. What was the Durham Report briefly, and what were the findings very briefly?
It was every special counsel that's appointed produces a report to the Attorney General. Special counsel's Durham Report largely focused on Crossfire Hurricane and included extensive summary findings in classified and unclassified manner. And we released the classified version, finally declassifying it for the American public in this committee.
Correct. And you released that in July of this year.
I think so.
Yes, sir. Isn't it true that in the classified Durham Annex, as it's referred to, that in 2016, the Obama administration obtained intelligence information from a source contained in two separate memoranda, one in January of 2016 and one in March. The two memoranda described confidential conversations between DNC Chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz and two individuals from the Soros Open Society Foundation. Isn't that true?
As written in the report, I'll let her speak for itself.
In the Durham Annex in January of 2016, the memorandum noted in part that President Barack Obama intended to scuttle the FBI's investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server and mishandling of highly classified information during her time as Secretary of State. Isn't that found in the report?
I believe so.
Isn't it also found in the report that in March of 2016, the memorandum also included references to the same Obama effort to shut down the Clinton investigation, but additionally outlined a plan to falsely connect Trump to Russia? Isn't that in the Durham Annex?
I think it's in more than the Durham Report, but yes.
The memo also stated in part that, quote, the Democrat Party's opposition is focused on discrediting Trump, among other things. The Clinton staff, with the support from special services, is preparing scandalous revelations of business connections between Trump and the Russian mafia. Isn't that also found in the now unclassified Durham Annex?
I believe so, sir.
According to the Durham Annex, based on analysis and translation of the intelligence, FBI analysts believed that special services could either mean the FBI or CIA, or the Trump dossier author Christopher Steele. Isn't that in the Durham Annex?
I believe so, sir.
When the Obama administration received intelligence in March of 2018, Fusion GPS was preparing open source opposition research regarding purported ties between Trump and Russians. The research was paid by the Clintons campaign and the DNC. Isn't that open source and also in the Durham Annex?
I believe both.
Okay. And so also in the Durham Annex, which I found interesting, was the potential campaign plan was shared with high-ranking career officials at DOJ. Isn't that in the Durham Annex?
I believe so, sir.
The Durham Annex describes that in July of 2016, emails allegedly between Leonard Bernardo, senior vice president of George Soros's Open Society Foundation, included data providing specificity on the Clinton plan in an attempt to smear Donald Trump by falsely linking him to Russia. Isn't that in the Durham?
I believe so.
And so briefly, this additional evidence that you've unclassified and released to the American public, what does that purport to show or augment about the Durham report that you can share with the American people?
Put simply, that the FBI was weaponized.
Against a political campaign.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The
I have UCs.
gentlelady from Texas recognized for unanimous consent.
Yes. First one is Russia's ghostwriter hacker group takes aim at German election. This is from Politico.
Objection.
The next one is Director of National Intelligence, 30 days until election 2024, which specifically states that our assessments about activities and goals of Russia, Iran, and China are unchanged from earlier election security updates, and that they were meddling.
Objection.
And I've got three more. The last three are that how Russia is using artificial intelligence to interfere in elections. Moscow's attempts to interfere in US and other elections are nothing new, though their tactics and strategy are constantly evolving.
Objection.
The next one is Russian interference coming soon to an election near you. Russia pursues a systemic strategy of undermining elections and influencing public opinion in the West. EU and NATO countries must recognize that Moscow often acts through agents within their own borders and build resilience to such interference.
What's the source?
This one is CarnegieEndowment.org.
Okay, without objection.
Thank you.
The gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Director Patel. I'm glad that I'm going a little out of order here because I'm going to pursue some of the things that you were just talking to Mr. Fry about and remind you about your confirmation hearing. At your confirmation hearing in January, you said under oath, and I quote, "There will be no politicization at the FBI. There will be no retributive actions taken by the FBI should I be confirmed." And in your written response to the Senate questionnaire, you said, I quote, "Personnel decisions shall be based on performance and adherence to the law. And every FBI employee will be held to the absolute same standard and no one will be terminated for case assignments." So I want to just go through a couple of scenarios with you to get a sense of whether you think these are examples of politicization of the FBI or making decisions based on the performance and adherence to the law. So, first question, would hiring FBI agents, analysts, and supervisors from only one political party being politicization of the FBI or making personnel decisions based on performance and adherence to the law?
We don't ask FBI people, applicants, where their political parties are.
Mr. Patel, do you ask FBI applicants who they voted for?
The FBI does not.
Are you aware that in the lawsuit that Mr. Driscoll filed against you and the FBI, he was asked who he voted for?
Since that lawsuit has been filed, that's ongoing litigation, I'm not able to comment.
Well, but it also means that you just said that what happened in his situation didn't happen. So we will go on to the next question. Let me ask you an even easier one. Does firing agents for working on the cases that they were assigned to and that the president didn't like, is that politicization of the FBI or making personnel decisions based on performance and adherence to the law?
The FBI doesn't terminate anyone based on case assignments alone.
Has the FBI ever been sued by somebody who felt that they were terminated based on case assignments?
In the entire history of the FBI, I'm sure they have.
No, since your tenure.
I'm sure there's ongoing litigation.
Yes. In fact, there is ongoing litigation. And in fact, people have been asked who they voted for. And in fact, you are running an FBI for the President of the United States rather than the people of the United States, because my questions were not hypotheticals. They are the things you have done during your tenure. And according to a lawsuit filed last week by long-term FBI agents, you fired former acting director Brian Driscoll. He had served with the Bureau for nearly 20 years, earned a Medal of Honor, Medal of Valor for bravery during the dangerous ISIS raid, and had a wealth of crisis response experience and led the FBI's critical incident response group. When the Trump administrations interviewed Mr. Driscoll for that role, they interrogated him about his political leanings and who he voted for in the last 5 elections. Questions Mr. Driscoll refused to answer because those types of questions impermissibly politicized the FBI. You also fired Steve Jensen, who served the FBI for nearly 2 decades and ran critical terrorism, counterintelligence, and organized crime operations, whom you once described as embodying what the American public demands of the FBI. But he was fired because he took part in investigating crimes committed on January 6th. And Trump's MAGA base lambasted you online for keeping him at the FBI. So he's no longer at the FBI. You also fired a decorated combat veteran with decades of experience in the Bureau, Special Agent Walter Jardia, because he worked on the investigation into the Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election and helped investigate Trump's ally, Peter Navarro. Director Patel, it is very clear that you have flunked your own test. You've put saving your job, which I actually believe you were being honest about during your confirmation hearings, over doing what's right for the FBI and the American people. That is not adherence to the law. Thank you, and I yield back.
Time of the gentlelady is expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, it's great to have this opportunity. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your service. And I've got to say, one of the most disheartening components of the previous administration, when I was working with local law enforcement all over the state of North Carolina, all over the country, people rightfully did not really care about the inner work.
It's important for this FBI to be transparent without jeopardizing our investigations. So a little bit of the timeline is important. Charlie Kirk was unfortunately assassinated on September 10th. We immediately, the next day, released images early in the day in local time in Utah to start the public partnership in our manhunt for the assassin and culprits. At approximately 5 p.m. local time, I arrived on the ground and walked the crime scene myself. And we flew multiple FBI assets in and out to process DNA simultaneously while bringing in evidence response technicians, hostage rescue teams, and other experts to assist state and local law enforcement with their investigation. At 8 p.m. local on September 11th, the FBI collected and populated and promulgated at a press conference a video of the suspect on the grounds. We also released enhanced images Due to that release that I directed and ordered, the suspect involved was apprehended and in custody at 10 p.m. local time. That's less than 2 hours after we did the video release and the photo release. So within 33 hours, that individual suspect was in custody, and his family, who has since been interrogated, specifically stated to FBI interrogators that because of the video that the FBI released at my direction, and because of the photographs that they released, they identified their son, they confronted their son when he swung by their home, and that's what led to his apprehension. We are still, the FBI has that investigation ongoing, and it continues to be ongoing. And I want to thank the state of Utah and the state and local authorities there. And I also want to thank the Attorney General and President Trump for directing resources to allow us to conduct that investigation as we have. Under this administration, the FBI has arrested more than 23,000 violent criminals, 23,000 in 7 months. That's twice as many year to date last year. We've taken over 6,000 firearms off the streets. 6,000 guns are no longer in the hands of criminals in 7 months. We've identified and found and located 4,700 child victims. That is a 35% increase year to date last year. We have arrested 1,500 child predators. That is a 10% increase year to date last year in just 7 months. We've assisted our partners with countless counterterrorism operations around the world. We've captured at the FBI 4 of the most top 10 wanted fugitives in the world in 7 months. To put that in perspective, that's as many as my predecessor nabbed in the entirety of the Biden administration. We got 4, we got more coming. On top of that, in 2 weeks, thanks to the help of the CIA, we collected and captured one of the individuals responsible for the horrific Abbey Gate bombing that led to the murder of 13 service members. We did that in 2 weeks. They didn't do it in the 4 years of the entire prior administration. Nationwide, we've been executing our Operation Summer Heat, the FBI's national focus on targeting violent crime based on intelligence-driven operations. Ask the citizens of Seattle, Miami, Memphis, Charlotte, Chicago, New Orleans. To specifically highlight New Orleans and Nashville, there has been a 250% increase in violent crime arrests in those cities alone, and other mid-major cities that I've just listed. In just a few short months, we have already unleashed 1,000 FBI personnel across this country. Every single state across this country is getting a plus up. This is a fiction that the FBI is short or that we are compromising the men and women in the field. They do not need to be in Washington, D.C., so we're sending them into the field to each and every one of your states. Because of that, crime is at an all-time low. We had to do it because of the explosion of crime. And maybe the most important stat for Americans to realize, in just 7 months, we are on track to produce the lowest murder rate in modern U.S. history by double digits. Those are results not of mine. Those are results of the men and women of the FBI. If you want to criticize me, bring it on, but do not attack the brave leaders in the field. We are also working 24/7, 365 on the opioid epidemic that is killing more than hundreds of thousands of people a year. We have seen 1,600 kilograms of fentanyl off the streets so far in 7 months. Year to date, 25% increase. To put that in perspective, that's enough to kill a third of the American population, 120 million Americans. 100,000 kilograms of cocaine and meth gone off the streets. Earlier this year, I highlighted in Cincinnati, Ohio, how we're getting creative to chase down those that were willing to do harm to our citizens, not just by striking at the heart of the fentanyl producers, but the fentanyl precursor companies in China. And we indicted for the first time multiple companies and individuals, not just in America, but in mainland China, that are producing the ingredients that produce and make fentanyl that kill our children. And we're going to keep going. Counterterrorism work, cyber attacks, and foreign adversaries are something the FBI must never sleep on, and we are not sleeping. In the counterintelligence space alone, this year, year to date, 30% increase in counterintelligence arrests from the DPRK, Russia, Iran, and China. And I want the American people to know, in this setting, there's a lot of work that the brave men and women in the FBI are doing we just can't get into, but they don't stop. Our cyber threats, ransomware attacks, those harming our children online. We have nearly a 20% increase in indictments arrests in 7 months alone this year. We're going after those that harm our malware, infrastructure systems, telecom systems, and energy structure. Combating SALT and Vault typhoons are just a little bit of the examples we're doing. Maybe most importantly, under the counterterrorism and domestic terrorism umbrella, are nihilist, violent extremists, and those that label themselves 764, who wish to go online and convince children to maim and mutilate themselves and commit suicide. And we are producing record numbers of arrests under that umbrella organization. We even stopped an individual in the 764 network who wanted to conspire to kill an adolescent girl. He is now in custody. Transparency remains one of my main priorities at the FBI. And this is what I've done in my 7 months at the helm. We've produced more than 33,000 pages of documents to Congress to a variety of committees, including, I believe, 7,500 to this committee alone, if memory serves me correct. To put the 33,000 in perspective, my predecessor in 7 years produced 13,000 pages in total to the United States Congress. His predecessor in 4 years produced 3,000 pages in total. I repeat, I have produced 33,000 pages in 7 years to this Congress and will continue to do so. I'm dedicated to restoring the trust and the mission and the integrity of the FBI, and we cannot do so without congressional oversight, and I promise you I will continue to do so. On the Epstein case, the original sin on the Epstein case was how it was handled by Mr. Acosta when he first brought the case in 2006, 7, and 8. The original case had a very limited search warrant, had a very limited search window, had a very limited investigative window. I was not there when those search warrants and that investigation was launched. I would not have done it that way. They were limited to only 3 to 4 years of investigations from 97 to approximately 2001 and 2002 to 2005. Mr. Acosta allowed Mr. Epstein to enter into a plea agreement where he served weekend jails for trafficking minor women. He also was allowed to leave jail to go home on the weekends. Plus, he allowed a non-prosecution agreement to be signed as part of that plea deal, prohibiting future investigations from that prosecution and from that evidence, and prohibiting the collection of further material. That is the original sin. We are working with Congress to produce more than any administration ever has material on Epstein. And I welcome the challenge to tell us that we are not being as transparent as the law allows. We even went to court and asked the judges to lift those prosecutorial agreements and to lift those court order seals, and they denied us 3 times. Congress is welcome to do the same and join the fight. And I'd lastly like to focus on operation that the president led in DC. Because of this, we are taking this fight in DC to every single city across the country. 2,100 arrests in the last month alone. DC has seen a 60% decrease in gun crimes, 75% decrease in carjackings, and 53% decrease in homicides in our nation's capital. And rightly so. We're bringing that fight to the streets of America. I want to thank you for your support, and I'm proud to be the director that leads this FBI into a new headquarters building that they've needed for decades, saving the taxpayer $3.5 billion and also providing our workforce a safe environment. If you don't know the calamity that is the Hoover Building, I invite each and every one of you to walk around. I'll give you a tour myself, and you can see where the cement falls on the heads of our employees that is only to be saved by netting. Just to give you an example. Thank you for support to our mission. And I do want to highlight one thing about DC. It's because the FBI gathered sources and evidence that we were able to, through our source network, identify the horrific murder of the DC intern, Eric Tarpinian. And I've spoken to his family, and we are working to bring them justice. And Mr. Chairman, in my 16 years, now my 17 years of government service, if anyone has any questions about my service, bring it on.
Thank you, Director. We will now proceed under the 5-minute rule. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Eisen.
Director, delighted to have you here. You are a breath of fresh air. As you outlined, and I won't repeat it, the accomplishments, you did so with the same resources as your predecessor, roughly. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
And so how much of that has to do with taking people out of the backside of the FBI and moving them into the field, into doing the job for which we primarily pay the FBI?
It's exactly what we needed done. 1/3 of the FBI's workforce resided in the National Capital Region before I got there. 1/3 of the crimes do not happen in Washington, D.C.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. So 1,000 personnel of the FBI were deployed across this country on a permanent basis, and every single state in this union is getting a plus up, not a reduction, a plus up of 1811s of intel analysts and support staff. And that is why the crime rates are going down in record numbers.
Thank you for doing that. And it's perhaps the hardest thing for a bureaucrat to do is to lower the head count around them that support them. And I appreciate your willingness to do it different than your predecessor. A lot of what you covered earlier was the find, the discovery, and then the prosecution that is done by the DOJ. But I want to talk a little bit about the prevent side.
On the Charlie assassination, sir?
No, on all of these.
Okay.
Okay, for example, and I'll bring it up before the Democrats bring it up, January 6th. January 6th, we now know because of your find that in fact, there were people involved who were not just observers, but participants who in fact, it's been alleged, and I personally believe, in fact, were part of promoting, perhaps even the one woman who died, encouraging her to walk through a door that led to her death. When you see that kind of activity, and you know it was done under predecessors with full knowledge, whether it's January 6th, where embedded people crossed the line, or any other activity, including obviously the Russian hoax that we're now dealing with up in, front and center. My question to you is, what can you or others do to one major question I have after practices. Now, you've changed the interpretation of many of those practices. That's why you fill in the blank that has led to the chairman not seeing anything until you took over.
I'm wedded to aggressive constitutional oversight. Having been a House congressional staffer, I know that is an important part of securing our democracy. And the way we make it an everlasting, enduring process is by showing the American people the results of what we are doing and the important work of this committee and putting it out to them so they can see government waste, fraud, and abuse. And then they can demand from our constituents and our electors that they want this process to continue.